everyone, and welcome to my channel, Babbling Books. If it's your first time here, my name is Elaine. So this is going to be my mid-month wrap-up. I've already read 11 books, so if I wait and try to do them all at once at the end of the month, it's going to be like a 45-minute video. So I read all thrillers so far this month, which is not typical for me, but I've sort of been on a roll. I've just really been enjoying them. So I've been reading one thriller right after the other. Some are adult thrillers and some are YA. And it's a mixture of physical copies and audio, which is usually how I read. So let's get into it. And I've got to tell you, making this video has been a lot of work today. If my cat's not trying to knock down the ring light, my dog's barking. And then I just spilt tea on my book. I'm so mad at myself. I was rushing and this was my favorite, visually, it's been my favorite book this month. Of course, it was that book that I spilt it on. But anyway, to the books I've read. So the first book that I read this month, I actually listened to on audio, and I had read it before, and that is Blue Monday by Nicci French, and it's book 1 in the Frida Klein series. So I never finished this series, but I want to, so I decided to start back at the beginning. I'm one of those people, if I wait long enough to read a book, it's almost like reading it again for the first time because I forget so many things. So Frida Klein is a psychotherapist, and she starts to become suspicious of one of her patients. A child has gone missing, and she starts to wonder if her patient had something to do with it. So she goes to the police, and she ends up finding herself involved in finding this child. This is not an action-packed mystery. It's kind of slow where you're just sort of putting the puzzle pieces together, but I never found it boring. I didn't think that it lagged. Nicci French's books are kind of like that, so I was expecting it. But I did find it very creepy and unsettling, and I wanted to find out if Frida Klein was right about her patient, what happened to this child. So I do very much recommend this series and Nicci French's books in general. So after that, I read The Boy from the Woods by Harlan Coben. So this is another book that I listened to on audio. So this is about a man named Wild. Wild was discovered as a young child in the woods. Nobody has any idea of how long he's been in the woods. And he was able to communicate and to read and to write. And all grown up, he is ex-military, and he works sort of as a consultant for a security company. And he is very much a loner, which you can imagine. And one day his godson comes to him and says that a child from his class, they're teenagers, has gone missing, and he wants his godfather to help him find this girl. So they start this process of looking for this girl. It goes in a direction that they didn't see coming. They end up in a mess with all of these little subplots going on. I really enjoyed this. I think that Coben is a fantastic writer. I like his characterizations. This was very easy to listen to on audio. I think it would be good in print as well. And there's only 2 books in this series so far, and I really hope the author puts out more books about Wild, because I really, really like the character. So this is the journal page that I did for it. I had a lot of fun doing this one because he He is out of the woods, but the moment that he was old enough to, he went right back into them. So I ended up giving that a 4-star rating, and I really did enjoy it. And then I read Pieces of Her by Karin Slaughter. So this was really good. You have a mother named Laura. She is in her late 50s, early 60s, I believe. And she is an upper middle class white woman. She's a speech therapist. And her daughter, Andrea, who's in her 30s, has recently come to live with her. So Andrea is sort of floundering. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She's sort of just stuck. So Andrea and Laura go to breakfast, lunch one day, and a boy comes in and he starts shooting people. And everyone reacts exactly the way you would expect. They're hiding, they're terrified. Some are just frozen in place, unable to do anything. Well, that is not how the mother, Laura, reacts. So, of course, the police want to know about Laura because she didn't react the way a upper middle class speech therapist mother should have reacted in this situation. And Andrea realizes that she doesn't know her mother at all. So Andrea ends up leaving town and unraveling the mystery of her mother. And you also have a timeline from the past that starts in the 1980s. And it follows this woman. And at first, you're not really sure what this woman has to do with the story at all, but you eventually figure it out. I enjoyed both the current timeline and the past timeline equally. And the past timeline does eventually give you the information that you want to know about the mom, Laura. And then, of course, when the timelines finally catch up to each other, everything is revealed to you. It was really good. And as you can see, this has recently been turned into a Netflix series. Yeah, I could see that this would make an excellent TV show. I haven't watched it yet, but I bet it's going to be good. So very, very much recommend this one. And the journal page, just put that over there. The journal page that I did for it, I had a lot of fun with this one. I finally broke out the metallic paint pens, which are actually really hard to film because they're so shiny. But I had a lot of fun with that one. So that one I ended up giving a 4-star rating, and it does have trigger warnings for sexual assault, physical abuse, drug abuse, and child abuse. And then I read the second book from Harlan Coben's series about the boy from the woods. So this one is called The Match. So the main character, Wild, that's the boy that was found in the woods, he puts his information on one of those like ancestry DNA websites, and he ends up getting a match. And it's like a really small match, like a 2.4% match, and it's like a cousin or something. And he uses that information to try to find his family because he wants to know who he is, how he ended up in the woods. So in doing that, he ends up because it's funny because you keep saying this, or I keep saying this over and over, he ends up, but that's like the plot for every book. So what he's trying to do is relatively simple, locate his family, and he ends up in this really messy situation. So there's all these little subplots going on. So the main plot is Wild trying to figure out who he is, but by contacting his family, he ends up in these situations. I did not like this one as much. It had less action, and it felt like there were too many things going on. I still enjoyed the book. I gave it a 3-star rating. Probably a 3.5 would be more accurate. And I would read another book about Wild. I just didn't like this one as much as the first one. But I was just as interested in who Wild is, so that kept me reading for sure. So this is the journal page that I did for it. I tried to do like a little DNA strand here, and this is the readout of when he finally gets the report from the DNA website. So, yeah, I didn't write any trigger warnings for this one. And then I read, you know what? I threw that book over there because I'm like, you reviewed it. You're done. Give me a minute. And I'm back. Okay. So I read the sequel to this book. So it is called Girl Forgotten. So Andrea, the daughter, she has become a member of law enforcement, and she gets her first assignment, and that assignment is to guard a federal judge at her home. This judge has begun receiving death threats that they think may be legitimate death threats. So Andrea starts to investigate the murder of the judge's daughter. So back in the 1980s, the judge's daughter was a pregnant teenager who was murdered. And nobody ever figured out who did it. So Andrea starts trying to solve this murder while also protecting the judge. The book also has the past timeline from the perspective of the judge's pregnant teenage daughter. I will say, that timeline, the one from the pregnant teenager's perspective, was enraging. The amount of slut shaming that poor child had to deal with and nobody protected her from was so maddening and so disgusting. The scene where she goes to the doctor to find out if she's pregnant was horrific. This girl has never even had like any sort of a pelvic exam, and the doctor's like forcing her feet into the stirrups and telling her, stop crying. You know, if you had kept your knees together, you wouldn't have been in this situation, and just slut shames her the entire time and tells her, you know, I hope you're going to take some responsibility instead of ruining some poor boy's life. I mean, I was pissed while I was reading that perspective. However, the book itself was very good and it was interesting. I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first book. I actually found the timeline from the 1980s to be more interesting than Andrea's timeline, but it was still a pretty good book. I ended up giving it I gave it a 3.5 star rating, but it's a 4-star on my book journal because I haven't figured out how to do half a star yet. So I actually really didn't even enjoy doing this journal page. I have so many negative feelings about this book that my enjoyment was almost non-existent, but I thought it was a good, well-written book and it was interesting, but it wasn't enjoyable to read. It was just horrible. Excuse me. Okay. So then I decided that I was going to try another series by Karin Slaughter. So I read book 1 of the Grant County series. The main character is a pediatrician named Dr. Linden. Is that right? Oh, Linton. So Dr. Linton also works as would it be the pathologist? She does the autopsies for the county because it's such a small town. And her husband is also, her ex-husband is also the chief of police for this small town. So Dr. Linton goes to meet her sister for lunch. She goes to the bathroom and she finds a dead body that she then has to autopsy. So she's involved with trying to solve this young woman's murder. This has trigger warnings for sexual assault and for child abuse, and I thought the plot was okay. Dr. Linton went back and forth from being a strong female character to then letting her ex-husband kind of walk all over her, and it was sort of like I couldn't get a handle on who Dr. Linton was. And as far as the plot went, it was okay. I didn't think it was fantastic, but I thought to myself, maybe it's suffering from, you know, book one of the series syndrome. So then I read the next book, which is called Kisscut. So Dr. Linton is once again the main character. So Dr. Linton is at the bowling alley for a date, and she follows this girl outside thinking the girl has been injured. And when she gets to the parking lot, the girl that she was trying to help, the teenage girl, is outside in the parking lot pointing a gun at a teenage boy. And Dr. Linton's ex-husband, the chief of police, is pointing his service weapon at the teenage girl. So her ex-husband ends up shooting this girl. And then Dr. Linton has to do the autopsy. So during the autopsy, she makes some pretty horrific discoveries about what has been done or what this teenage girl has gone through. And she and her ex-husband work on trying to figure out who did this to her, why she wanted to shoot this boy. Her ex-husband is like eaten up with grief about killing this kid. They're sort of going back and forth about whether or not they want to try to have a relationship again. Her ex-husband's behavior in this book, I mean, I understand that he was like traumatized from shooting this kid, but he was pretty shitty. And he tried to make Dr. Linton feel shitty about herself. And he would like rag on her about not putting enough effort into her appearance. The damn woman works a full-time job as the only pediatrician in this town and then is responsible for all of the autopsies. She's like, I cannot even imagine being that busy. And he just, you know, you could put some effort into your appearance. I think it's amazing that she's even able to get enough sleep to function. Anyway, that was just a pet peeve for me. However, the trigger warnings in this book are so extensive. There is so much child exploitation, child abuse, sexual assault, all those sorts of things. I am not going to read any more books from this series. I may never read another Karin Slaughter book again. She just takes things too far for my personal enjoyment. I just cannot enjoy a book where I have to read about horrible things happening to kids. So I didn't give this a rating. This is the journal page that I ended up doing for it. So, yeah. And then to the book that I have recently ruined by spilling my drink on it. So this is a YA book called The Girls I've Been, and it's by Tess Sharpe. The main character is a girl teenager named Nora. Nora is at a bank with her two friends. Who's one of them, the boy's name is Wes. I can't remember the girl's name. And while they're there, two guys come in to rob the bank. Well, Nora is not your average teenager. Nora spent her formative years learning how to be a con artist, which is what the title is about, The Girls I've Been. The personas that she took on from, I want to say, age 8 up into her early teen years, where she would pretend to be somebody else to work a con. So she uses her skills to try to outsmart the robbers, to try to make sure she and her friends and everyone else makes it out alive. I was so happy that the author was able to write this character in a believable way. Sometimes when I read middle grade books or YA books, the teenage character is so capable that it's almost unbelievable. And the author handled that wonderfully. I could see an 18 or 19-year-old girl being able to do these things. There's also, beside the current timeline while they're in the bank with the robbers, there are also chapters dedicated to Nora's previous lives as different girls. I enjoyed those as much as the timeline where Nora is trying to save everyone in the bank. Which is, you know, sometimes, you know, when you're reading a book in the previous timeline, you just want to get through it to get back to the present so that you can find out what's going to happen. I found the entire book, chapter to chapter, to be very, very interesting. And And I loved learning about all of the girls that Nora has been. This also has some good LGBTQT representation because Nora is locked in the bank with Wes, who is her ex-boyfriend, and the girl whose name I can't remember, who is her current girlfriend. So very much recommend this one, and I'm so upset that I just ruined this book because I loved the cover, and I was hoping that my son would want to read it, but now it's gonna have to be replaced. So this is the journal page that I did. So I tried to do the different characters, the different girls Nora's been, and then cross them out. But yeah, this one was fun. So this one does have trigger warnings for child abuse. And there's some hints that maybe there was some sexual abuse, but nothing incredibly detailed. You just sort of are pretty sure that maybe that's what was happening. But I very much recommend that book. I enjoyed it a lot. And then I read For Found Dead. So this is another YA thriller. So it's funny because when you talk about characters dying, you feel like you're giving a spoiler, but that's literally the title. So a group of teenagers are doing their closing tasks at a movie theater. This movie theater is attached to a indoor mall, but the mall has shut down. There's no businesses left open except for the theater, and this is the last night the theater is ever going to be open. So during the evening, they discover one of the other employees has been murdered, and they realize that they cannot get out. They are locked inside this movie theater and or the mall. The manager, who has the keys, is missing. Their cell phones are locked in the safe because they're not allowed to have them while they're working. And they are locked in with a murderer. So they're trying to find a way out and survive. And as you can tell from the title, 4 people don't survive the night. It sounds amazing, but it really wasn't. A lot of the creep factor relies on the atmosphere. There's no light, so it's incredibly dark. There's lots of sheeting because the mall is closed and it's under construction. Noises, oh my God, is that the murderer? We can't see where we're going, but it didn't translate well. It would make probably a really good, entertaining movie, but it didn't translate well as a book because I guess maybe that's the fault of the writer. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But I thought this was going to be fantastic, and I was really disappointed. And then on top of that, because there is so much fleeing and hiding and place to place to place, and oh my God, you never really got to know any of the characters. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed in this. And if you have a recommendation of a book that sort of along these lines, I would love to hear it because I want to read something like this, but I want it to be really good. So yeah, this is the journal page that I did for it. I did some popcorn and a movie ticket, and this was supposed to be a giant popcorn kernel, but it wasn't working. So I was like, I'll just leave it as like a bubble thing. And then I tried to do like a little film strip and, I don't know what that's called, the clacker. So anyway, yeah, I ended up giving this a 2.5 star rating. It's a 3 rating in my journal because I can't draw a half star. The only trigger warning really is violence. And then I listened to One of Us is Lying. So I actually read this a few years ago, but I found out that the 3rd book is coming out in June and I want to read it. So I decided to start over from the beginning because, like I said, I don't remember details very well years later. So everyone's probably heard of this, but if you haven't, a group of teenagers, because this is a YA thriller, a group of teenagers are in detention, and while they're in detention, this guy named Simon dies from an allergic reaction. And the police think that he was murdered. And Simon had a blog, and on this blog, he exposed secrets of his classmates, and it ruined lives and caused one person to try to kill themselves. It broke up relationships. I mean, this blog was incredibly upsetting. And so all of the people in detention with him are suspects. So those kids try to get together and figure out what happened to Simon, who killed him. They're kind of suspicious of each other. The first time I read this, I figured out who the murder was right about halfway. I think I was only about 4 chapters in when I remembered who the murderer was the second time I read it. It was okay. I ended up giving it a 3-star rating because at this point I mostly read it to refresh my memory. But when I looked at Goodreads the first time I read it, I only gave it a 3.5-star rating that I rounded up to a 4-star. So it's not bad. Obviously, I liked it enough to continue the series. So the second book is called One of Us is Next. I had troubles with this one. So you have characters from the first book plus new characters, and it made for a ton of characters, and it made the book feel muddy. So you have, you have Knox, Maeve, Phoebe, Emma, a little bit of Cooper, Nate, Bronwyn, Eli, Addie, Ashton. I'm up to 10 people now. And while those characters don't all have their own points of view, they're in and out of the book so frequently. So it was just too much. I had really wished that the author had narrowed the focus down just to the main plot of who has revived the idea that Simon had. So this person texts you from an unknown number and says, you either need to pick a truth, and you either need to do the dare I give you, or I'm going to reveal a truth. So now you have people, teenagers, taking dangerous dares, or he's going to reveal a shocking truth about you that's going to mess up your life. I wish the author would just stuck with that premise instead of all the other additional little side plots. It muddied it up. I only gave this a 2.5-star rating. I really wasn't sure if I was going to read the third book, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to because I feel like I've put so much time into it, and I'm hoping it'll be better. But that is everything that I read so far this month. Please feel free to drop me some recommendations because I haven't read a ton of YA. So if you have a horror YA that you think I would enjoy, or a YA thriller, I would really like to read some. Anything that's sort of like happening at a summer camp, or something like the kids in the mall that are locked in. Anything like that, I would like to have some recommendations, please. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And I'll be back in a few weeks to talk about the rest of what I'm going to read in May. Bye.